Hello and welcome to Make It Happen with Will Polston. I'm Will Polston. This is episode number 127, and in this episode I'm joined by Ameerh Naran. Ameerh Naran is a very successful dynamic serial entrepreneur. Now aged 36, he's the owner and CEO of several global companies including Vimana Private Jets, one of the world's most successful private jet brokerages, and has recently founded Naran Automotive, a supercar company using his own build and design, with his first hypercar being launched in late 2022. Ameerh quickly gained a loyal client base and built up an impressive network with access to over 5,000 aircraft worldwide and a charter team available 24 hours a day, 365 days a year to attend every client need. As well as private jet aviation, Ameerh has turned another passion into a business venture which has great synergy with the core charter business. In his first attempt in 2006 at becoming a racing driver was thwarted by a lack of funds. His attempt to buy a car company also ended in disappointment when in 2015 he was outbid for Weissmann, the liquidated German supercar company. And so naturally he created a supercar company of his own. The 148 horsepower V8 powered all-wheel drive Naran Coupe with a top speed of in excess of 230 miles an hour and a 0 to 60 sprint time of just over 2 seconds. This is the creation of Ameerh, who is turning his boyhood dream into a reality with the launch of the limited edition machine. In this episode, we're going to be talking about the mindset and the business of owning private jets and hypercar companies. So Ameerh, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Will.
Great to see you again, and really looking forward to this time sharing the story of kind of your life, I suppose, which I personally find very inspirational. I'm really enjoyed the times that we've met up to date with everybody that's listening. So for many years, in fact, sort of for as long as I can remember, I've become obsessed with finding out why people think the way they think, why they do the things they do, and ultimately how they get the results that they get. And what I've established is the majority of that time, it boils down to people's mindset. And I've broken those components down. I try and sort of simplify the best way I can in these different things. And one of the other things that I've realized is people that really do achieve great things that make them feel good and have a big impact on people that they love and people they care about, is they have what I seem as a North Star, which is an ultimate goal in life that they want to, that ultimately that they would love to achieve. But if they don't, it's not the end of the world. And that essentially acts as a guiding light towards all of the thinking and the actions that they have. And what I found fascinating when we first met was that you have exactly this North Star, and you identified yours at the age of just 4 years old.
Yeah. So at 4 years old, I decided I want to one day own a car company and race cars professionally. And I didn't change my mind, but my goals were also sort of reinforced by my parents. Not that they say sort of that, not that they try to influence them in any way, but when I said I one day want to own my own car company and race cars, my parents said, "Okay, well, you will." And I genuinely believe that's my reality, and I've made a decision on what I want to do, and had a lot of support from both my parents through my entire childhood and upbringing. And I think I attribute a lot of, where I am today to that.
So I'm running saying, and this has been quoted somewhere, so it may be right or it may be wrong, but you'll soon tell me, is that your parents told me that you can do whatever you want if you create the opportunities. Is that right, or words to that effect?
Yeah, absolutely. They said you can do or have anything you want in life. You've just got to know how to ask for it and be willing to work for it as well.
And that, I suppose, that belief that was installed to you at a very young age, you've obviously gone and delivered that, and we'll go and talk about some of the things that you've achieved today. But what were the sort of things? Because look, most parents, they want to look after their kids, they want the best for their kids, and they all have their own different ways of doing it. But what were some of the things that, for maybe the parents right now that have got kids that would love to enable their children to have the type of mindset you had, what were the sort of things that they did for you? And am I saying it's your sister that you?
Yes, I have a younger sister. Yeah.
Yeah. So what is it that your parents did, as other than tell you that little clip that you mentioned, that enabled you to go on and have that kind of belief?
There were so many things. So my parents are very into sort of mind, body, spirit stuff, very alternative thinking, which back when I was growing up was very uh quite different. I mean, it's now, you know, more universally accepted, I think. But like for instance, I wasn't allowed out of bed in the morning unless I'd repeated these affirmations, which my mom would make me do. Like, today is a great day. I love and approve of myself. Every day in every way, I'm better and better and better. There were several of those which I'd have to repeat. And but whilst my parents were all about you know, positive thinking, discipline also meant a lot, and we weren't really mollycoddled in any way. So like, brought up, you know, also growing up in Zimbabwe, the schools there are all about discipline and being strict. So for instance, and led by example. So my mother in winter, where our swimming pool at home is built in a way so that there's trees surrounding it, so it's ice cold. And in the middle of winter, my mom would wake up at 5 a.m. so it's at its coldest and swim 30 lengths every day. Not because she'd read about the Wim Hof method or anything like that, which I'm sure works, but just because in her eyes, you know, you need these sort of hardships, and discipline is very important. You can fight through anything. And yeah, your mind is, you know, everything is mind over matter. And so had a lot of that. Was also told by my parents, look, you can have or do anything you want in life, but you've got to be the best of it, best at it. So if you decide you like cleaning toilets, that's what you do, but you make sure you're the biggest toilet cleaning company in the world. What my mother always told me was, you know, we have the opportunities of education. 75% of the world can't afford a single meal a day. So we're so privileged. If you're not the absolute best at what you do, then it's sort of a waste of space, because, you know, we have all these opportunities. We have, you know, the education, the mindset, which is so important. So there's no excuse to not achieve. So it's really a combination of sort of this can-do motivation, and then also discipline is so important.
Yeah, and I think that the types of things that you mentioned there in terms of the cold water swimming and things like that, it's really building resilience, isn't it? You know, I personally finish a shower each day with a cold shower, not because necessarily I think that, yes, there are obviously benefits to it, but it's actually training myself to do something that I don't want to do. You know, I don't want to have that cold shower, but I do it because there'll be times when I don't want to do certain things, but I essentially am forcing myself to do them anyway, because I know it's sort of short-term pain, but long-term gain.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's very important. Also, you know, growing up in Zimbabwe, it's a very sort of yesteryear kind of attitude. And so it's very strict. So like, say we at school, we walk past an adult and you didn't lift your hat and say morning ma'am or morning sir, you get put on manual labor. And if you get put on manual labor 3 consecutive weeks, you get caned. Like, so, you know, all this kind of stuff. And you get to go from lower 6 to upper 6 in high school, we'd have to go on something called the leadership camp, which is the US Marines do it for 11 days training. We were meant to do it for 3. And basically we'd get sent out, and we're all like, you know, supposedly spoiled private school children, but we're sent out. I didn't have a name, so I was like Red 11, and as soon as we arrived, we're not, for 3 days, you're not allowed to wash your hands, brush your teeth, anything like that. We're sent out into like mud in a river, covered, can't wash it off, and you have no name. So you're not judged by anything. All your possessions are taken away. You don't have a watch or anything. And we literally had to run for 3 days nonstop. You'd be so tired, you'd fall asleep, fall on the floor, wake up, we're hitting the ground and have to keep running. We had a brick which we had to carry everywhere, was never allowed to touch the ground. If it did, you'd get into trouble. And a long gum pole, which everyone in your group would have to ensure was always levitated and never touched the ground. So even when it came to meal times, we'd eat, jogging on the spot, eating. And at night, they do it in winter, so it was cold. We'd go out, we'd get sent out into river, and then lined up in sort of a field with a big space between us, and we'd all be shivering, ice cold, and these be mosquitoes biting us. And then, like, it was all about building character and resilience, like you say. So one of the prefects would hold like a small thing of mosquito repellent, which you can rub on yourself, and we would all be being eaten by these things, being bitten constantly. And they'd say, okay, who wants mosquito repellent? We'd all obviously put a hand up. And if one person, it would be passed on, and one person really used it vigorously, they'd say, well, there's obviously not going to be enough for everyone else. You haven't thought about everyone else. A blanket punishment, you're doing press-ups for the next 30 minutes. So it was very, very hard. But on the same token, materially and education-wise, there was nothing. No, my parents didn't spare anything. My father came from a very privileged background. My mother, not at all. And they always wanted to make my mother especially wanted to make sure we had all the opportunities she didn't have growing up. So, like, she wanted to learn to play the piano and things like that, which she just couldn't because her parents didn't have the means. So when we were children, I hated it, but we had, I had tennis lessons from the Wimbledon tennis champions, Wayne and Byron Black. Their parents used to train them. They trained us every week. We had swimming lessons from an Olympic, from a coach who used to train the Olympic swimmers. Golf lessons, piano, everything for years. Which, of course, all I wanted to do was drive cars because that's what I want to do for a living. So I spent my entire time complaining that we had to do all this growing up. But I guess, again, my parents thought would make me rounded, but they had this genuine desire to make sure that there was no opportunity we didn't have, especially my mom, because she didn't have all the opportunities growing up.
And I think that's very normal, isn't it? The things that we have values, we all have values. And I break values down into two types of values. You have an end value, which is essentially a feeling that you either move away from or towards. We have a means value, which is something we do, which gives us fulfillment. And the things that we value most are typically born out of some perception of a void. So sort of coming into the racing side of things, because I really want to get into the business side of things, because you've got the most fascinating, inspiring story. But being a racing driver, that was your passion. That was everything you wanted to do. You did that as a teenager, I'm right in saying. And then you went on and studied. This is why I talk about the North Star, So in your teenage years, all right, your parents got you to do certain things. So they wanted you to be rounded, but your passion was racing. You did racing. Then you studied automotive design at school and university, I'm right in saying.
Yeah.
And then things changed and you turned down a job from BMW and you turned down an internship at Jaguar, I'm right in saying.
No, it was and I was offered an internship at Jaguar, which I turned down, and also Pagani.
Right. Okay. So what was the reason that you decided so this was your dream and you kind of wanted to do these things. So what was the reason you decided to turn that down?
Well, I'll tell you how it came about. So when I was 14, because I knew I wanted to own a car company one day, my favorite cars at the time were the Aston Martin Vanquish, and I love BMW in general as a brand. So I wrote to Ian Callum, who is head of design at Aston Martin and Jaguar, and Adrian Van Hooydonk, who is head of design at BMW, and said, I'm a 14-year-old boy in Zimbabwe. You are my role model, and I want to one day own my own car company and race cars professionally at the highest levels. So would you give me advice on how to go about it? And they both very kindly wrote back with sort of a life plan. And I remember Ian had said, you need to make a decision of whether you're racing cars or design and set up your own car company, because you can't do both. And my mindset was, well, I will do both. But so he'd said they both said do an undergrad in industrial and product design, followed by a postgrad in automotive design. And both had said for the postgrad, it needs to be at either a Royal College of Art or Pasadena Art Center in Detroit, because those were the only two universities offering transportation design as a postgrad. So what I did was the best university for industrial and product design, specializing in automotive, was University of Coventry. So I went to go see it and with my parents, and I didn't like Coventry very much. So the second best was Sussex. And I've always had this mindset, because my parents always told me you can have whatever you want, or anything you want, you attract into your life. So I decided I want to go to Sussex University. And I can remember for this course, it was the only one I applied to. And like the student guidance person at my school was saying, well, you can apply to several universities. Surely you should apply for a backup. I'm like, no, because that's where I want to go. I've always had that attitude, never settle for less. Like, for instance, I can remember for many years, since I was in high school, I was sort of obsessed with watches, and I always decided, I want a Patek. And along the way, as my business grew and stuff, early days, I couldn't afford one, or wasn't able to get on the waiting list either at the time. And so, there was an opportunity to get a Rolex or something. And I was like, no, I'd rather not wear a watch. So for like 10 years, I didn't wear a watch, because I only wear a Patek. I've always had this attitude. I only want what I want, and I will never settle. And if it means I have to wait a bit longer, I'll wait, but I'll get what I want. So yeah, I went to University of Sussex, did my undergrad, and enrolled in a scholarship program for a Formula Renault scholarship program in France. I was studying during the week in the UK, and then racing in a scholarship program in France, a Formula Renault series. And speaking to the other drivers, I was the only one who'd never driven a proper racing car before, but made it to the semi-finals, and just got knocked out in the semi-finals. And then after that, went to Silverstone Race Academy, I was driving on a very limited budget. So we picked just races where I thought we'd get a lot of media attention, and I get picked up by a sponsorship agency. And I was while I was at Silverstone Race Academy, was approached by a sponsorship agent who were willing to take me on. And then, the recession hit in 2008, and they went under, and it was just impossible to get sponsorship unless you made a name for yourself, and you'd have to you spend a lot of money to get there. And there were a lot of issues in Zimbabwe, financial and political issues in Zimbabwe. So my parents were unable to continue funding it. So I decided I would try my hand at business in order to make enough money to set up my own car company and fund my racing career, and did loads of things along the way. Tried everything, trading exotic skins, started doing some gold and diamond deals, dealing in commodities, tons of stuff, failure after failure, often out of my control. Like, for instance, even when I was racing in 2008, I was trying to do a copper deal, which would have been very, very lucrative. And the day the LC was issued for payment, the first commodity to be hit by the recession was copper, and the price dropped from $8,000 to $4,000 a ton, which meant the end of that. And I'd been working towards that deal for a year prior. Like, instead of studying hard at university, spent most of my time, trying to get these deals done and get rich, to help fund the racing. So, yeah, and then just I was on Facebook. Facebook had a trial feature called Facebook Forums a long time ago, and I went to the business part of it, and I met a girl who was based in Las Vegas, and she was looking for gold and diamonds. So I figured I'd try source them from her, and found some sellers in Zambia, went across, and they turned out to be con artists, and in the process nearly got kidnapped, and but managed to get away with it scot-free. And then she went to work for the movie producer, Spike Lee, and he set up a jet company called Halcyon Jet. So she contacted me and said, look, I know you're not racing cars anymore and you're from Africa. Halcyon don't have a representative in Africa. Would you be interested in representing us there? So I did my research, and there were no private jet brokerages I could find in Africa, or at least Southern Africa at the time. So I went back to them and said, look, it looks like a good opportunity. I'd be interested, but I want exclusivity for the whole continent to make it worth my while. And they said they weren't willing to do that. So what I did was I just Googled the world's largest jet companies. One was NetJets, which is Warren Buffett, and the other Blue Star Jets. So I reached out to Blue Star first and convinced them to give me the exclusive rights for the whole of Africa for Blue Star Jets. So I had essentially the franchise for the whole country, for the whole continent. And then I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to run the business. How do I go about it? And then I went on another social network called A Small World, which launched at the same time as Facebook. And on there, I met a gentleman called Joseph Ameerh, who had a jet business in Sweden at the time. So reached out to him and told him the story about how I got the agency for Blue Star Jets for the whole of Africa, which, it was a very high profile company that was, known as the largest jet company in the world. And he was flabbergasted that, I was 23 and managed to get the agency. So he asked me how, and I talked him through it. And he said, well, he was very impressed that, that I was savvy enough to manage that. So he said, well, look, I'll help you. So again, coming to the if you ask, you very often get. So he said, okay, look, I'll teach you how to run the business, because he'd already made his money. He was very successful in his own right. So we'd go on Skype every day from 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. He didn't want anything for it. He just helped me, for 4 hours a day for like nearly a year. And in the process, I also met another gentleman called Dennis Yans, who owned a jet company in Chicago called Charter Jet International. Because, trying to learn the business, I just contacted loads of people. And I told him the story, and he said, okay, well, if ever you have any trouble with a flight or anything, call me and I'll give you advice and try and help you how in any way I can. So we'd speak, weekly or bi-weekly for an hour or two. And if I was struggling with a deal, I'd call him and ask, what would you do? Can you help? And he'd give me great advice. And these two gentlemen sort of mentored and groomed me into making a massive success of Blue Star Jets in Africa. And then that grew on to Blue Star offering me the agency for the whole of Asia, then Monaco, Switzerland, the Middle East. In the end, I own nearly every Blue Star Jets office out of North America.
Amazing. Absolutely amazing. I just want to go back a step, because we've spoken about this and you've shared this before, is that there was a moment, wasn't there, when you turned up to Blue Star to have the meeting and you walked in at 23 years old and they were like, where's your dad, or something like that? Was that?
Yeah. I can remember sitting down in the boardroom and the president, vice president, legal team, everyone walk in. And we exchanged greetings, and they're like, how long's your dad going to be? And I said, no, it's me. And they were furious, because they felt, they assumed, because I spoke so confidently on the phone, when I wanted the agency, and we signed over fax before they met me, they assumed I was, much older and had tons of experience in aviation. I knew nothing. So, so they weren't too pleased about that. Which is why I guess I had to get a lot of external support from people like Joseph Ameerh, because they didn't have the confidence, because of my age and lack of knowledge, that I would make a success of it. And then when I did, they later, took me more seriously.
But I love the fact, because obviously a big component in this is where you had the contract with what was the Halcyon. And then you said, well, I've got this. And then you almost used that as a barter tool, didn't you, to be able to...
Well, I sent through the agreement that Halcyon had signed, which I didn't countersign. And I knew that, on receipt of that, they think, okay, this other jet company wants to work with him. they must have done their due diligence, and of course they hadn't done any due diligence, and that's what sort of pushed it over the line.
Yeah, I just find that phenomenal. But the thing that I think is so important, and I'm a big believer in creating what I call an MPM group, which is mentors, peers, and mentees. So mentors are people that step ahead of you. Peers are kind of at your level to challenge you and give you a bit of competition, but to share some sort of beneficial experience of what's going on that's current. And then mentees are people that you also help up and that you give that lift up. But you did that, and with Dennis and with Joseph, like you say, you sort of absorbed everything they said like a sponge. And if you don't ask, you don't get, right? So you reached out to these people. They said yes. They liked your tenacity and what you did. And do you think that your parents, and maybe specifically your mum's approach of, if you want to get good at something, whether it's piano, tennis, or whatever it is, learn from the best. Do you think that had a big influence in you deciding to reach out to those people?
I hadn't thought of it like that until now, but I guess, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think I think something my parents always said as well was, if you're going to take financial advice, make sure it's from someone wealthier than you. If you're going to take advice on working out, make sure it's someone with your personal trainer has incredible body, I guess that's the similar sort of thought process, like learn from the best, otherwise it's the blind leading the blind, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. So then obviously Blue Star, that sort of end up falling away. Did they go bankrupt, or what was the...
Blue Star went bankrupt and sold their client book to a company called Apollo, which made Apollo the largest jet brokerage. They tried to push me into joining Apollo, which I didn't want to do. And the great thing about them going under is, I had a non-compete agreement, which meant I couldn't be in the industry anymore. But because their Blue Star went under, it no longer held. So it meant I could set up completely on my own, which is when I set up Vimana Private Jets, my current business.
And Vimana Private Jets, like you say, so you then created your own brokerage that was you doing it. It wasn't under Blue Star anymore. And like you say, it was maybe a blessing in disguise for you. And ultimately, over the years, that's become one of the world's most successful private jet brokerages.
Yeah. Specifically on the high end, specializing in VIP airliners.
Yeah, so VIP airlines, and you've got, so I mean, for example, the Kardashians have been clients. So you had a specific scenario. I don't know if we're allowed to talk about it or not, but a specific scenario where you helped them out of a bit of a sticky situation. I'm right in saying.
Yeah. So naturally, because of the nature of the business, we can't say who our clients are unless they've given us special thanks. But the Kardashians were very kind to me in my early years. And they put me in the credits of their show. So at the end, it said special thanks to Ameerh Naran. So yes, they were a client. And the reason they became a client was they were in Mykonos on a public holiday. Must be 7-8 years ago now. And they needed to fly from Mykonos to London when the airport was, they wanted to fly on a public holiday when Mykonos airport was closed, and they wanted to fly at 4 a.m. when the airport never opens at that time. And they spoke to their regular providers in the US and were told, sorry, it's not possible, fly the next day. They spoke to the operators in Greece, told the same thing, sorry, you can't do it, fly the next day. So they then reached out to me. Yeah, we met with the Minister of Transport, Minister of Tourism, airport manager. I got that airport opened. And then from London, they wanted to fly to Phuket and film on the tarmac as they landed. They were told tarmac access is a privilege reserved for the royal family in Thailand. Yeah, so they came back to me because I helped with Mykonos, and we made it happen. And then they decided to fly exclusively with us for several years after that.
Amazing. And I know you've got your fair share of stories of no doubt various situations that have happened. In terms of, before we go into the car situation, which I know is your real passion, and I also find that fascinating, particularly when we link in the airline brokerage to that. But what's been, in fact, there are two questions. First of all, one of the things that I've got huge admiration for people is when I learn about their work ethic. And when you and I were sat down having coffee, you were telling me about your work ethic when you were building that business, which was...
So in the first years of doing it, so I'll tell you, when I got the agency for Blue Star Jets, I was able to get my first booking fairly easily within a month of having got the agency. I was already working really hard to take clients, but I managed to get a booking. After that, it was 6 months to a year, not a single booking. And all I was doing was I was getting Fortune 500, Forbes rich lists, and going through one by one, contacting every person, like writing them hand letters, phoning, emailing, pursuing. And I'd wake up at 5 a.m. every day, work till 2, 3 in the morning, just going through these lists, mailing, emailing, phoning people, getting turned down, and kept doing this every single day for nearly a year until I started getting any real traction. And then when I was running the business, I'd sleep 4 hours a night. And then once I was doing because I'd be trying to get clients and manage the business, and I couldn't afford to hire staff. So I'd have a whole lot of phones, all with different names. So I'd be someone, the accountant, and someone else, the sales guy. And it'd be nonstop. And then I can remember I managed to arrange the music tour for probably the largest rapper in the world. And that was 3 months of him traveling. And every second day he'd been in a different city. It was his US tour. And I was a one-man band, portrayed myself as this massive company because I had Blue Star Jet's name behind me, but no one realized that, it was me on my own. It was a franchise business. So managed to do this tour, but I barely slept for like 3 months. I thought I was going to have a nervous breakdown at the end of it because I literally just stayed in bed. All I do was leave to eat a bit, and I'd sleep in between sleeping. Like every 20, 30 minutes, my phone would ring. I'd have to respond to an email, answer a call, and then get a few minutes sleep in between when I could. And then after that, I started employing a lot more people because I made quite a lot of money on that music tour, and relatively. And, so I could delegate some of my work. But and, even when I used to sleep before, when it was 4 hours sleep, I'd have my alarm on every 30 minutes to check in case an urgent email came through, because I can remember there was another big A-list actor that I was trying to get on as a client for many years, kept contacting his team, and they said they would book for me. But and then once I was flying to Dubai from Harare, and so I was unavailable for like 6 hours. And when I landed, I was flying to London actually. So we landed in Dubai in transit. I connected to the Wi-Fi in the airport and to receive this email. So quickly got hold of this actor's agent and said, sorry, I've been flying. I'll get the quotes to you straight away. And I planned on missing my connection to London so I could send the quote and then booking another flight on. I would just do it from the airport, from the airport. And she said, well, it's too late. I tried calling you 3 times. You didn't answer. So I've called someone else and booked from them and never had opportunity to quote them again. So you can't miss those opportunities. So since then, I'll only fly on an aircraft which has Wi-Fi. I'll never go on like a yacht or something where I won't have network, even now that I've got a big team around me, because you just never know. And so for many, many years, I'd have to be available all the time. And now I have a great team and I'm able, and most of it's delegated. So I'm now thankfully in a position where, I can get a full night's sleep and put my phone on do not disturb unless it's, but again, even then I've got another phone which rings really loudly, which my staff know if there's an emergency, they can call me, wake me up. So
Wow, 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 wow. Now, what I find fascinating about this, everything we've just explained, is that even creating that brokerage and all of the copper deals you were trying to do and the diamond deals and everything was ultimately to enable you, or a stepping stone to enable you to live your dream, which was owning your own car company, but not just any car company.
Yeah. So all I ever wanted to do was be at a point in my life where I could set up my own car company. And so in 2015, I was at a party in Los Angeles, and um, a lady came up to me and said, oh, it's so nice to see a fellow Londoner because of my accent. And that was before I moved to London. I was still living in Zimbabwe at the time. So great to see a fellow Londoner in LA. And I said, well, I'm actually from Zimbabwe. And she said, well, I'm actually Zimbabwean as well. And we got chatting, and turns out she was the producer of a show on CNN called African Voices, which was about successful African businessmen. And it's funny, she's Octavia. She's just launched a book, which I got delivered to me as I have it right in front of me, Octavia Gordema. But so she said, well, look, I'd like to do a show on CNN about you, an episode. Could you write a profile about yourself, your bio, and send it through? So I don't know what it was, but I sent my bio, but I didn't mention a single thing about the jet business, which is what she wanted to feature, and just basically said, since childhood, all I wanted to do is set up my own car company, and I'm working towards it, and I'm doing loads of business ventures, private jets being one, in order to be able to do this. And she responded, because, you know, I believe so strongly that the universe, if you want something badly enough, and so long as it's for the greater good of all, the universe conspires to make it happen. And so she responded saying, I should introduce you to my husband, Ivan. He is the head of design at Kia. He was at the time. He's now high up in design at Tesla. But I should introduce you to Ivan. And she did. And I spoke to Ivan, and he said, well, I've got a friend, Henrik Fisker, who's looking at buying Wiesmann, the German sports car company. Perhaps you can work together on it with him. So he in turn introduced me to Henrik Fisker, and Fisker still sat on the board at BMW and said, look, if you come up with the money, we can buy Wiesmann together. So again, you know, when things happen for a reason, I was at a party once, and someone told me about the South African car collector who had the most incredible collection of cars. And I always figured, you know, one day I'm going to own my own car company, so I should get to know all the big car collectors around the world. So I added him on Facebook, and he accepted the invite. And then every time I was going to Johannesburg, and this was going on for years, but every time I go, I'd send him a message saying, his name is Vivian Natterson, like, hi, Vivian, I'm going to be in South Africa. Would you like to meet for a coffee? And I'd never get a response. But if there's anything, if there's one thing about me, I'm persistent. So, you know, many years of doing this, when Henrik contacted me and said, you know, if you come up with the money, I sent a message to Vivian on Facebook, and everyone I could think of who I thought would have the money to be able to finance me, and said, hi, look, I'm looking at buying Wiesmann with Henrik, because using Henrik's name naturally would give me more credibility. I'm going to be in South Africa, which I wasn't, but if he responded saying he'd meet me, I would be in South Africa. I'm going to be in Johannesburg. Are you free to meet? And he responded, let me know your dates. Come over to mine for breakfast and we can discuss it. So I went over, and they gave me a bank guarantee for, I think it was 48 million euro to put in a bid for the company, which we did. And I was outbid by another buyer by 6 times what I offered, which I personally didn't think it was worth. So walked away from it. But in the process, met with BMW on a regular basis. And, BMW as a child was the car company, was my, I always loved BMW cars because my dad only ever drove BMWs. And I thought they were great cars, great drivers' cars. So it's funny, the brand I wanted to work with since I was a child was the brand that I was brought to. And again, this is me really believing the universe really will conspire to make things happen for you. So because I've been contacting BMW on such a regular basis, I built a strong relationship with them. And then when looking to buy Vimana, I did doing my due diligence. I met with all their suppliers, and one of them was a company called Racing Dynamics. So I met with Racing Dynamics. Their CEO and owner was a guy called Michael Weber, who is still someone I'm working with right now. And I told him the story. I want to set up my own car company. And this was during the Vimana days when I was looking at buying Vimana. And he said, well, he said his son, I think, was four years old at the time, and he wants to be a professional tennis player. And he said, well, look, if your childhood dream was to set up your own car company, I'm going to do everything I can to help you and give you my support. And at the time, I couldn't really afford to put together presentations and plans, and I didn't, get the intelligence. So he said, look, my team will help you. And they helped put together a plan and worked with him. And then unfortunately, the Vimana deal didn't go through, but we bought, when I told him I'm setting up on my own with BMW, he helped negotiate with BMW Motorsport for powertrains for the new car, and is doing a lot of the electronic work on the vehicle as well. So again, someone who's just, I think, people have just been so kind to me. And it's amazing. I think if you ask, people will really go out of their way for you.
And that's very evident in your instance. But there's something that you said, and I really want to highlight this for everybody that's listening. There was something you said as sort of the suffix in one of the sentences, which is, if it's for the greater good. And I know I'm personally, I wanted to bring that up because otherwise it's just sort of for vanity's sake and for ego, but for you, it is about the greater good, the impact and the way you can help people. I mean, the fact that you're on here and you want to share, I know that you're very passionate about wanting to share your message. And I suppose ultimately what you've achieved, and use that to be, or you being the light for other people to show what's possible.
Yeah. I mean, there's several ways in which I believe me making a success of my car company is for the greater good. I mean, firstly, I think I'm producing, my intention is to produce the ultimate driver's car. So for the person who buys it, I will bring joy to them. It's beautiful. I think it being parked on the road makes the city or the roads a better place because it's so beautiful. I think it will inspire young children who see the car to either work hard to be able to afford one, or to create their own if that's what they want. Because naturally, people growing up in Zimbabwe, you didn't really see supercars, but we would travel a lot as children. And, coming to cities like London, you'd see all the Lamborghinis and Ferraris. And I could sit outside in car spot all day because, that was the highlight, being able to see all these amazing cars. And that really inspired me. And then something I learned when I was 16 was, so I was waiting for my O-level results to come in. And in class, our English teacher was asking everyone in our class what we want to do when we grow up. And I said, I'm going to own my own car company and race cars professionally. And she responded, okay, Ameerh, be realistic. And because of the way I was brought up, this was the first time anyone questioned it. My parents were very strong in ensuring that the people I met everywhere was always a positive environment. They really controlled the environment because they believed, and I too believe, that the mindset of the people around you and what you're taught will affect your view of the world and what you believe is possible and what isn't. So on hearing her saying, oh, okay, be realistic, I thought this woman's an idiot. So because my entire life I was told you can have whatever you want. So that was my belief. And this woman, I was just like, what's wrong with her? anyway, as I've got older, I've realized that more and more people are told things like be realistic, or that's not possible, or things are unachievable. And I've learned that my upbringing is actually quite unique, whereas I believe that was the norm for everyone. And I think something I'd like to do is be able to, through platforms like yours, hopefully teach parents and show children that you can have and do whatever you please. And yeah, that's very important to me, and I believe hopefully I'd be doing good that way. Now, when in the early days, of course, that wasn't my intention. My intention was more producing the most beautiful ultimate car in the world, and that would leave my mark in history. But as I've got older and realized that my mindset was so different, I think teaching that might be how I make a difference.
For sure. Unbelievable. So stats, Ameerh, stats on the car for people that are eagerly seeing the car lovers here that are going, well, tell me the numbers. What's the numbers? So stats and costs and all that good stuff.
Well, it's a full-on hypercar, a 5-liter twin-turbo V8 producing 1,048 horsepower, 1,036 newton meters of torque. It's really a GT3 race car. So when we started the project, we met with an automotive marketing company, which works with the likes of Ferrari, etc. And they asked what I wanted to produce, and I said the ultimate driving car, so really analog experience, where you feel completely connected to the car, because from my experience, most of the supercars out there and hypercars, I've been very privileged, and I've been able to drive nearly everything in existence now. They're too approachable, too easy to drive. I think that there's still a market for people like me who want to feel like you're a hero to be able to drive it, and it takes a lot of skill to be able to control the car. So I wanted to create more of a purist vehicle. And the marketing company said, well, no one cares. No newspapers, no one's going to write about you. You've got to be a superlative. You've either got to be the most expensive car in the world, like W Motors or Bugatti. You've got to be the fastest car in the world, like Bugatti or Koenigsegg, or you're just not going to get any press headlines or coverage. So I thought, okay, let's distill what is a pure driving experience. And for me, handling. So what I did was I thought, okay, what's the ultimate expression of handling? What's the benchmark? And, universally, it's the Nürburgring lap record. So we found out, so the overall lap record at the Nürburgring at the time was an electric car called the Neo EP9. So I went in search of the engineering team behind it. It was a company called EY3, and said, look, you've got the overall lap record. This is the engine I have. Styling wise, in my opinion, the last 10 car, the most beautiful cars over the past 10 years have been the Apollo IE and the De Tomaso. So that was designed by Wind Design. So contracted them to do the styling on the car. So I said, look, these are the components. I want you to develop a chassis that will break the internal combustion front engine lap record, which they said they will do, and simulations seem quite positive. And then another thing I noticed is whenever I had a supercar or hypercar, I felt the first thing I'd want to do was drive it on my own. And that was loads of fun for a few months. And then you'd want to share the experience. So you'd invite a friend or a girlfriend along, and then you want to share it with more people, and you're always limited to 2 seats. And also I speaking to a lot of car collectors I knew, they all wanted to be, their children wanted to come along, and they could never do it if they had more than one child. So I decided I wanted to build a 2+2, so 4-seater, which didn't exist at the time. And when we planned on launching, was at the same time as the Koenigsegg Gemera, which is a 4-seater hypercar. But the Koenigsegg Gemera is more of a GT, so long distance cruiser, which is comfortable. Whereas our car is a proper hardcore GT3 racing car that we've made road legal. So very different experience, but with 4 seats. So yeah, our hope, our intention is, I think the 3 hypercar brands out there right now are Bugatti, Pagani, and Koenigsegg. And my hope is to be considered one of the hopefully soon to be 4, and be the ultimate expression of a hypercar.
And I'm sure, I've got absolutely no doubt that that's going to be achieved. The 108 in total, only 108 available that are being made.
108 on this platform. Reason being, when I first started go-karting at 12 years old, my racing number was 108. And
love it.
We're planning to do within that 108 4 variations of the vehicle. So a coupe, a convertible, a race suspension off-road version of it, and an 8-liter V12.
Amazing. And the cost?
Because every car is so tailored to each customer, it's difficult to say a cost, although we imagine most after options will be spec'd to between 1.5 and 2 million euro.
There we go. So for first of all, I just want to say, Ameerh, a huge thank you for coming and joining me on the on the show. I know people have found this extremely insightful. If people want to find out more about Vimana private jets, where can they find you and look into that?
We have a website. If you just Google Vimana private jets, that's Vimana privatejets.com, and that's our website. And then the car company, Naran Automotive, so my surname, Naran, Naran, Automotive. If you Google it, the company website will come up, and you can get in touch with our marketing or sales teams.
And if people wanted to connect with you on socials in any way, can they? Where could they potentially connect with you on socials?
I'm on Instagram. My full name.
There we go. Well, we'll put all that in the show notes so people can get access to it and go and check out the websites, and I encourage them to do that. If you could leave one message, just one message for people that have been listening to this that could enable them to, that would be your sort of leaving message for them, what would you say that would be?
You can have or do whatever you want in life. You've just got to be willing to have faith that it will happen, because from my experience, it never ever works to timelines. What you want to happen in a year can take 10 years. So you have to have a strong belief that it's going to be a reality, and be willing to really, really, really work hard.
Amazing. Well, Ameerh, thank you again. It's been wonderful catching up. I really do appreciate your time. For everyone that's been listening, go and check out the websites, go and connect with Ameerh. I look forward to catching up with you very soon, Ameerh. And for everyone that's been listening, until next time, make it happen.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Make It Happen with Will Polston podcast. Make sure you join Will's free Facebook group, the Make It Happen community. Please support the show by subscribing on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, SoundCloud, or Google Play. Share this episode with at least one friend you think would benefit from it, and give Will a 5-star review wherever you download your podcasts. Until next time, make it happen.